I'm gonna start making a new series on this channel called Underrated Fighters, where I try to give recognition and shine a spotlight on fighters that I think are underrated in the sport of boxing. And this includes fighters from the past and fighters in the present. So it literally includes every type of fighter that you can actually think of right now. So in my opinion, there's been one of the most underrated fighters in the heavyweight division. In my opinion, is Povetkin, Alexander Povetkin. Now, for the past decade or so, he has been at the top of the heavyweight division. He's fought everyone, and he has beaten most of them. In terms of him actually being underrated, if you can see on the actual graphic, you can actually see his amateur record credentials, like his actual amateur pedigree in terms of what he accomplished. Obviously, he won an Olympic gold medal, but if you look at the actual thing, in the Olympic Games, he won a gold medal. In the World Championships in Bangkok, he won a gold medal. In the European Championships, he won 2 gold medals. In the European Junior Championships, he won a gold medal. In I can't even pronounce that, in Bulgaria, he won 2 gold medals. So this is a fighter that's been literally, in terms of his amateur credentials, he is an elite fighter. What you need to remember is he comes from Russia, and Russia does have a very strong amateur program. So for him to actually distinguish himself in this way and become what he became in terms of like the recognition that he's received, and get to the top of the amateur system in Russia, it actually says a lot, because the Russian amateur system is actually very competitive. I mean, if you think about the fighters that have come from Russia, like the likes of Sergey Kovalev and all these other fighters, it's a sport. It's basically a hotbed for boxing talent. So the fact that Alexander Povetkin managed to get onto the Olympic team and won a gold medal, and before that he won several gold medals, it shows his level of amateur pedigree. And I think his amateur record, people do mention like the likes of Lomachenko and Rigondeaux when it comes to amateur credentials. But one fighter that rarely ever gets mentioned is Alexander Povetkin. Even though he won a gold medal, no one really mentions him as an amateur fighter in terms of his amateur credentials, in terms of his amateur pedigree as in the professional ranks. Everyone always mentions the likes of Lomachenko and Rigondeaux, but not that many fighters. Not many fans mention Alexander Povetkin's amateur credentials, but it's clear to see. If you can just see all them gold medals that he's won, it's incredible. Now, in the professional ranks, he obviously won his first world title by beating Ruslan Chagayev, and obviously that was a UD. And on top of that, he beat the likes of Marco Huck, Hashim Rahman, and then his first loss was against Wladimir Klitschko. Now, that was a unification bout for literally all the belts, for the IBF, the WBO, the IBO, the Ring Magazine, and the WBA. But anyone that saw that fight will tell you that that fight was a complete farce, because Klitschko was allowed to get away with everything, like in terms of his excessive holding, the way he leans his weight down on his opponents, and the referee never said anything to Klitschko, or basically never said anything to Klitschko. That's how powerful Klitschko was at that time. So obviously he does have that loss against Klitschko, but that loss was a bit of a farce. Then after that, he went on an absolute tear where he knocked out Manuel Char, he knocked out Carlos Takam, he beat Mike Perez, he didn't knock out, but he stopped Marius Wack, he KO'd Duapas, obviously he UD'd Christian Hammer, and then he knocked out David Price, and then finally he got the fight against Anthony Joshua. Now, that Anthony Joshua fight was a bit of a weird fight, because even though Anthony Joshua, everyone remembers that Anthony Joshua knocked him out in the 7th round. Before that, it was very competitive, and I think Alexander Povetkin broke Anthony Joshua's nose. And on my cards, he was winning like 4 of the 6 rounds. He was outboxing at Anthony Joshua at that point. Anthony Joshua obviously landed that right hand and completely knocked him out. But before that, Povetkin done really, really well. And then after that, obviously he did lose to Anthony Joshua for all the belts. But then he fought Hughie Fury, got a win, which was a bit of a lackluster fight. His fight against Michael Hunter was in the Anthony Joshua versus Ruiz undercard. It was a co-main event, and that fight was a draw. But I personally think Michael Hunter won that fight. But the fact that he managed to survive that and managed to survived the first round where he got really hurt by Michael Hunter, managed to actually not coast, but he managed to get to the last round and see the final bell against a fighter with the pedigree of a Michael Hunter. It says a lot about Povetkin. And obviously at this point he was a lot older as well. And then obviously he had his fight against Dillian Whyte, the first one, where he got knocked down twice, and then out of nowhere he sets him up with a uppercut and knocks out Dillian Whyte. He set it up by kept throwing left hooks to the body. And then eventually he threw a left hook to the body, and Dillian Whyte covered up, and then all of a sudden he came up the top and he knocked out Dillian Whyte, and he won the WBC interim heavyweight title. But then obviously his last fight, Dillian Whyte learnt from his mistakes, and then he knocked him out. And managed to win the last fight. But at that point Povetkin was just past it and was shot. And then obviously after that he retired. Now obviously, like, his legacy, he's been up there with the best fighters in the world, and he's managed to get to this position where he's fought these top elite fighters, and he's given them really good fights as well. I mean, the Klitschko fight, Klitschko had a bigger reach, was taller, was a much bigger man, was skilled as well, and on top of that he was allowed to get away with everything. So I don't even count that as a victory for Klitschko. I mean, a proper referee would have taken him to one side and deducted points. Even though he won, it was a bit of a fast win. The fight against Anthony Joshua, he really showed his levels in terms of how good he is as a pressure fighter, because he outboxed Anthony Joshua in them fights and did actually land a lot of good shots on him, and broke his nose as well. If Anthony Joshua didn't land that right hand and he went to the 12th round decision, Anthony Joshua probably would have won, because obviously the scorecards in Britain are a bit of a farce. But it shows that in any rational scorecard, I actually had Povetkin winning that fight by 1 round up to the knockdown. So like if there was 6 rounds going in, I had Povetkin winning by 1 round. So Povetkin was winning 4 rounds and Anthony Joshua was winning 2. And then obviously Anthony Joshua knocked him out, and that's fair enough in it. Anthony Joshua is a top heavyweight. And then you had the Michael Hunter fight. I actually thought Michael Hunter won that fight, and I don't think it was a draw. But it shows his levels that he actually matched it in with there. The Huey Fury fight was a bit of a mess because Huey Fury never threw any punches. Obviously, he knocked out Dillian Whyte in their first fight, and before that, he got dropped twice himself, and then he lost to Dillian Whyte in his last fight and then retired. But that's an incredible record. He managed to win the heavyweight title. If you take into account his amateur credentials and how well he done, I think it's fair to say that Povetkin is an underrated heavyweight. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Povetkin fight 2 fighters. I would have loved to have seen him fight Wilder. When they tried to make that fight, obviously you can't deny the fact that fight fell through because of his failed drug test, and that's fair enough. You can take that, could tarnish his legacy to some extent. But even with the failed drug test, you can't deny his ability, his technical ability to pressure and fight as a pressure fighter. And then on top of that, you got another fight that I would have loved to have seen would have been a fight between Alexander Povetkin versus Usyk. Obviously, Usyk is from Ukraine and Povetkin is from Russia, so they would have thought that would have been a great fight for Eastern Europeans. That would have been a great fight. I think Usyk would have won because he was a lot fresher at that point, but it still would have been a good fight to watch. Like basically the one that fought Hunter, if he would have fought Usyk, that would have been an incredible fight to watch. But yeah, all in all, I think he's an incredible fighter, and he doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for what he's accomplished in his career. He came during a time when the heavyweight division was a little bit dead. Obviously, you had the Klitschkos ruling it at the top, but apart from the Klitschkos, there wasn't really that much challenge, really. His style is somewhat reminiscent of a Mike Tyson. If you look at Povetkin's style, the way he comes forward, the way he pressures, and he's not like a unsophisticated pressure fighter. Like if you compare him to like another pressure fighter, like a Chisora, for example, Povetkin is more like an aggressive counterpuncher than a pure pressure fighter. Like he's a fighter that would counterpunch your counter when you try to keep him off you. And he is reminiscent of like a Mike Tyson in that sense. Like he's not as dynamic as Mike Tyson, but the method to his madness, to the way he actually pressures a fight and tries to get him onto the ropes and do what he does to him is very reminiscent of a Mike Tyson. Obviously, Alexander Povetkin got trained by Teddy Atlas, who trained Mike Tyson as well. So you can see the influence of like Teddy Atlas on Povetkin's style when he was coming up. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Tell me your thoughts. What do you think of Alexander Povetkin? Do you think he's an underrated heavyweight? Do you think he's an overrated heavyweight? What fight would you have loved to have seen him fight? Would you have loved to have seen him fight Wilder? Would you have loved to have seen him fight the likes of a Usyk? Tell me your thoughts below. I think he is an underrated fighter. He doesn't get as much recognition as he deserves, and he's only lost to the elite of the elite. Obviously, he lost to Klitschko when Klitschko was in his prime. He lost to Anthony Joshua when Anthony Joshua was in his prime. And he obviously knocked out Dillian Whyte, but he lost to Dillian Whyte when he was past his prime. So, in my opinion, he is a top level heavyweight, and he probably doesn't get as much recognition as he deserves, that he should get. So yeah, that's my thoughts below. Like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.